So really with this, I think I put in the email I send out about this is that there's no particular agenda. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. If you're facing issues, if you have bugs you want to discuss. I tend to find that once we get started, we easily take up the full hour. It doesn't take too long to get there. So did anybody have any questions, concerns, things they wanted to talk about this morning, at least this morning in Colorado? How do we get on the email? I will get you on the email.
I will mention something that I came across.
Thanks.
Yesterday. We're newly on 2211, and we hadn't had this happen before, but I had a cataloger doing a search on a title, and she's having trouble recreating the problem, but I did get a screenshot of it. But she was searching, and then all of a sudden it was saying that she needed to log in, and she tried logging in. It said she didn't have permission to access that page, and she hit login 3 times, and eventually it went to the page, and it wasn't anything to do with cataloging. It had to do with system preferences. So she somehow got system preferences to come up when she doesn't have permissions for that. So please be on the alert about that. I'm not sure how she was able to get those settings to come up, but it was fully showing those permissions. I don't know if she could have changed anything in there. We did not try. We just took a screenshot and went away and tried to recreate the situation. Couldn't figure it out, but I did report it.
Yeah,
we had something. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ellie.
Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong. We had something like that with someone having access to SQL reports when they shouldn't have had permissions.
Yeah, it was that they were able to create SQL reports, and we don't allow that. So I think that's been fixed though.
Yeah, but it was something odd like that, that they suddenly had permissions that they shouldn't have had.
I know that there's been some weird permission things going on with the new version, because they recently, in this last version, moved a lot of the cataloging tools over to the cataloging page, and people that have explicit permissions for specific tools can't necessarily get to them because they don't have cataloging permissions. And so they kind of overlooked the fact that if they have permission to those tools, that page should be able to be accessible. So I know that they've got a patch for that, and I did request that they backport it to this version, so it should be coming out in the next security release.
I put in the chat what our main issue is since we upgraded. It's just devastating to us as a tourist destination when our libraries are super busy. And Bob spent a lot of time last Friday with us going over system preferences, but it just persists. Anything that touches the patron record.
I've seen some lag time, not necessarily with just 2211. I know I saw it in 2205 as well, with covers. Since they went to this new display for the book covers, we've been seeing some performance issues. And I've also noted in 2211, we've seen some performance issues. I was seeing them yesterday when we were editing certain screens. If I remember, I'll mention it, but the page would just, it was news. I was editing news, and when I would finish, it would just spin and spin and spin and hang. And then I would get error messages. So I've been seeing some performance issues on certain tasks.
It's we're blue in the face taking videos for ByWater to show them. And I think it's up to 5 seconds or something, which doesn't seem that long, but if a patron comes up to the desk, if the patron comes up to the desk with, 10 kids books or 10 videos or a mix, it's just awful. And we've been through as I said, Bob was kind enough to go through system preferences. Michelle has been working on reducing the number of loan rules, the number of item types. And it's just since we went to this new version. I mean, it was slow beforehand, but it's really slow now.
Yeah, and it's definitely slower than what we're experiencing. And we have more branches. So trying to isolate where that issue is. I mean, so far, my best guess, they had accidentally had on branch transfer limits and they weren't using them. So we turned that off and we're hoping that would help. And then, my next best guess is reducing item types and circ rules. But out of that, if that doesn't work, I can't really identify why it would be slower for them than it is for us.
I'm just thinking last night when I couldn't sleep thinking about this whole thing, has it anything to do with our firewalls?
That's possible.
But our systems person is on vacation, or not Bob, sorry, you're Bob, Brannon. I'm not getting much sleep over this issue, but it seems to me that one library that bypassed our firewall and went straight to the town doesn't seem to be experiencing the same latency. So our firewalls, we did a big project last year where we replaced all of the firewalls and the switches, but that was before we were on Koha. But again, we're just grasping at straws here.
I definitely think that's a lead worth pursuing. You can at least do some testing on that and pretty quickly determine whether or not that's a factor. Because you were saying that you can't recreate this at your office.
No.
So that would make some sense. That could be, we've had issues with upgrades where there's just been just the way something loads changes and then all of a sudden it works a lot slower. And so somehow that might be interacting with the firewall in a unanticipated way.
For us in Ocean State Libraries, the performance issues, and Renee, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's mainly the periodical records, right?
Yeah.
It is mainly, the periodical, especially the weekly periodicals, because we have them all on one record. A lot of like People Weekly, for example, and that's how we had it with the volume records on our previous ILF. So we're seeing a lot of problems with that, where sometimes you just can't check out a periodical at all. But we also do have problems with slowness with searching for the patron, I've noticed, where we were just talking about it now, and I just did a search. I'm working from home right now. I just did a search for my name, and it took about 15 seconds to come up, and that's way too long. We did have, it was actually longer than that up till last week. And we realized, we were talking with Nick from ByWater, and he said that because we were indexing an attribute, that was slowing it down in the patron records. So we changed that, so we weren't indexing that any longer. And that sped it up a bit, but it's still not where it should be.
I do notice that when you start to type in a name and the suggestion of what the names are pop up a lot quicker than if you actually do a full-on search for a name. So I've been noticing that with this version. So if you like type in a name and like hit enter or click on that arrow, it does significantly slow things up, versus if you just let that pop up with the suggestions of what that could be, and then if you click on something directly, it does seem to work a little faster. So that was something I noticed this week, actually. As far as the magazines, I can just tell you, we have each branch has their own record for each magazine. That's their own, and so they just have their items attached to it, and that's how we approach that, just because it does get so, even before we were going to get to the point with speed issues, that just seemed like a much cleaner way to manage that, is to separate that out.
Yeah, that wouldn't really work for us because we allow holds on them, and
Right.
with the first available for the item group. And what we're going to try to do is take everything that's not 2023 and just keep 2023 on a record.
Yeah, you could do
And
it by
see
year.
if that helps. Yeah. Have you noticed how many items you can have before it starts really causing a problem? Or
We had really slow, it was particularly when placing holds, when we were noticing like something like our copy of like a Harry Potter book would have like over 100 items, and then it would be excessively slow. Nick was able to apply something that sped it up. It's still on the slow side, but nothing like that. So I mean, if you're under 70, you should be able to get it relatively quickly.
yeah, how many locations do you have in your consortium?
We have individual branches. We probably have like 140, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But that's
Okay.
where, I mean, if I could jump in again, I feel like is when releases are coming out, I'm sure the developers are doing testing work, but I mean, from what we're seeing, and this is going to sound harsh, but it feels like the testing is being done in tiny little libraries with tiny little test databases, not anywhere near what's probably sitting around this virtual table here. And we're kind of losing out. Is that an unfair assessment?
I think it would be fair to say that that things are very much changing on the type of libraries that are joining, that are being supported by ByWater. So I think there is some growth pains with that. I think that is definitely happening. And what I do expect is that the more that do join, there's going to be a priority on improving the infrastructure and the testing and all that. I just know, as somebody that represents a ton of libraries, that when we do testing, we're not successful in testing what's happening in libraries either. So I do understand, at least to some degree, how, particularly with so many unique setups, how stuff falls through the cracks. So we have a test server, and we can do a lot of things. It won't replicate accurately the amount of transactions that would happen, like if you're in a busy library and a bunch of people are checking in and checking out. That's not something we can create on the test server, but at least we're able to get ahead of some things prior to a new release coming out.
I've made my feelings well known to Nate at ByWater, that if they're selling to Consortia, they need to get beyond this 70 items attached, and issues with lesser loan rules and stuff like that, either they just sell to or become support. I know they don't own the software. They either just stay in their little niche, but if they're want to attract Consortia, they need to up their game with this sort of thing. It just reminds me of Millennium, which was we were on an innovative shop. So it kind of reminds me the way Millennium was, that if you ran a global update or a report, you could bring the system to its knees. But then when the other software came out, Sierra, it seemed to be able to kind of segment out functionality. And I think Michelle really kind of expressed that really well at an internal meeting that we had. And I was like, exactly, just reminds me of Millennium.
You got to remember that, you know, koha is quite a bit different than the non-open source software, in that, you know, it is cloud-based and
Yes.
web-based, and with the open source community, you know, they're at the mercy of those that are willing to do the legwork and testing. And, you know, even though we have, you know, we are in a consortium, you know, we're not necessarily running into the issues that you run into because of, you know, how our network is set up, or because of how we're using the system. Everybody uses it a little bit differently. And so to be able to test every single scenario is not practical for really for any ILS, you know, regardless of being open source or not. You know, I think, you know, if you want to let people know of the issues that you're dealing with, yeah, you can certainly talk to the vendor, but they're, you know, they can only do so much. The place to apply the pressure is getting on to bugs and reporting these things, and you know, getting other people to confirm those issues, to join in on that bug and say, yeah, this is an issue. Because when they see that people are dealing with those problems in the community and can give proper steps to replicate those issues, that makes it easier for them to help resolve those issues. Talking to a vendor about those issues, probably, you know, if they're reporting those issues, if they're confirming those issues and reporting them to the community, that's one thing. And ByWater does a pretty good job about that. But being involved in the Bugzilla and directly communicating your concerns there is probably the best approach, because you can have a hands-on with the communication in that bug. If people are asking questions, you can provide direct feedback on that and be involved in the discussions and the direction that those things are going.
If I may, I totally get what you're saying, but I feel like, you know, as someone who's just recently joined the koha community and is, you know, we've launched, but are we done? Not by a long shot. And so, like Eileen, am I losing sleep? Absolutely. Am I encountering all sorts of problems? Absolutely. And it's really difficult to stop and go, okay, are we the only ones? How do we get in? Or is this been something that's been reported and already discussed? Is this a new problem? How do I even go about this? Because I'm not culturally acclimated to this new world. And at the same time, it feels like the world is caving in around us because our catalogers can't catalog, our circulation people can't check out books if there's any hint that a record has touched a magazine record, one of our weeklies. And it's kind of like, and nobody knows how to run any reports at all. So we're barely treading water. And I totally get what you're saying. But how did you deal with that? You know, how did you, because I mean, I imagine it wasn't all roses when you came on board either. How did you balance that, dealing with the putting out the fires and everything, and kind of orienting yourself to, I no longer have I am no longer a customer, I am a community member. How do I deal with that?
So I guess I would start off by saying, I started using Koha in 2012 in Idaho, and now I'm here in Kansas. And the way that we dealt with that when we migrated in Idaho from Voyager to Koha was that we had, specifically me, I was not a director, I was not the Koha person. It was a 50 library consortium, maybe 48 at the time that we migrated. And out of the whole consortium, there were directors, it's a very loosely organized consortium. So there's no central office there. The libraries are all, there was no director of the consortium. There was a group of directors that met monthly that managed the consortium. There was a circulation group there, and we created a system administrators group where the member libraries all had people that met monthly for a while, and then later quarterly, who sat down and talked about the issues and figured out a way to become part of that community. And so that's what I'd recommend, is that instead of trying to have everything go from your employees to you to ByWater, is try and find a way to spread out the work so that, and in the situation I was in, I was the circulation manager at one library with 6 branches. And because we had money at the time and other libraries didn't, my director for that first year we were on Koha devoted half of my time to the migration and to following up what happened at the migration, specifically within our libraries, but that kind of spread out to the whole consortium. So that's what I would say is, find a staff member or a group of staff members that are interested in the community. And, the way that I got started working with the community is that there is Bugzilla, and just once a week, I would sit down on Bugzilla for an hour or two. And if you go to Bugzilla, and I've talked about, I actually, at some point or another, I did a talk about this, about getting involved in Koha. There are these bugs reported in the last 24 hours, and there's bugs reported in the last 7 days, and bugs changed in the last 24 hours, and bugs changed in the last 7 days. And just once a week, I would go through and I would read, what are the bugs reported in the last 7 days, and what are the bugs changed in the last 7 days, and find out what's going on. And I would just read through those, and I would just open them up one at a time, and I would look at it and I would say, I have no clue what this is, so I'm just going to move on to the next one. And then, I would move on to the next one. And, okay, this one's about circulation and fines, and, what's the issue? And, I would just go through those things and learn how to be, and, that's kind of how I learned how to be a part of the community. I think the way when I did the talk about this, I divided into three activities that you can do. Is number 1 is listen, ask questions, and number 3 was make suggestions. And so just having somebody that can go in and interact with the community just by listening, just by reading up on what's going on once a week and reporting back maybe to the group, what's going on, but finding some people in your organization that are interested in this and that have the time. That's the biggest issue, is finding people that have the time to sit down and make this part of their routine. And that's the one thing that I would say, though, is what I'm hearing particularly from Eileen, is that it sounds like she's carrying the whole weight of the library on her shoulders from the way she's talking. So.
No, but I mean, the book stops with me because I'm the executive director. I mean, our whole membership chose this system, but And I don't have buyer's remorse. I do not have buyer's remorse. My thing about reporting the slow, the latency in the bug is like, I feel, as Steve said, am I the only one? I mean, other places are not experiencing this terrible latency except for periodicals. So, if I put it out there as a bug, is everybody going to say, oh, we're not experiencing that. We're not experiencing that. You know what I mean? It's like when to report something as a bug and when to try and do something internally. That's what I'm trying to balance.
Well, and you don't just have Bugzilla to talk to. You can also talk to the community mailing list and to the koha-US mailing list. Those are other places. Those are other avenues to.
I think and I mean, we have a systems manager. We have the staff who's here. So I'm not carrying it all, but I feel as the person who's the director of the consortium, I mean, it's 35 libraries with 38 locations. I feel, have I let people down? I mean, this is not a therapy session, but I just, and we're willing to put in some money into developments. I have to get a plug in for that. So we've already contributed a small amount to a development that I'm not sure where it stands at this point, but I can't even remember what it is now. George, did you write it up?
The big thing to keep in mind is doing what you're doing now, and that's being plugged into groups that are in similar boats. You are talking to libraries that deal with consortiums, so you're kind of narrowing down what's going on. Talking about it is very important because this is an element that a lot of ILSs don't have. They don't go and talk to other people and find out if it's a common issue. They just kind of are at the mercy of the ILS. And here you can talk about it and kind of pinpoint where the problem lies, because you're talking about it, and if you find that there are a lot of other people experiencing the same thing and not necessarily in the same places, then maybe it's an overall ILS performance issue. And if you're seeing it in a specific place, then maybe it has something to do with that specific element. So you're narrowing those things down. And by having that discussion, you can determine, is this something, if somebody else in the same boat and not experiencing this problem, then maybe it's a network or local issue as opposed to an ILS issue. So you have ways of doing that by being involved in these user groups. That's the main point of these user groups and the SIGs, is so that you can have these discussions and be aware of these things. I think that in combination with having test servers is a huge help in trying to prevent potential issues and upgrades. But I also know, like, I was mentioning earlier, they can't catch all of these things. Even with a test server, I can't catch everything because, I can't do all of the tasks that we do on a daily basis on our test server. I can try and encourage our staff to go visit the test server and play around with some stuff. But some of these things we can't find until we're in a real world situation. And so, that does introduce, an element of risk. But I think we run into that with any ILS. You run into that risk because those things can't always be tested on a workbench. Sometimes it has to be in the real world before we realize, oh, didn't see that aspect of it, and now we need to focus on it. So I want to encourage you, and I'm glad that you don't have buyer's remorse. I don't have buyer's remorse. We've been in it since 2012, and we had some performance issues right out the gate when we started, and that was a server thing. ByWater learned, oh, we need, when we have a consortium, we need to up these parameters on the servers for these types of organizations. So they learned some things when they took on more consortiums, and And I think that, since then, things have smoothed out tremendously overall for consortiums. But I'm glad you don't have buyer's remorse. I want to encourage
No, I
you
don't. I don't.
keep doing what you're doing.
I mean, some of us do, though. Some, I think some people do, especially if you're out on a circ desk. But I mean, we were talking about this internally the other day, and we were like, when have we ever before got to meet developers, from Innovative? Never. And I mean, Nick, Lucas, all of those guys are fantastic. Kyle, and we've had, face-to-face meetings with them. I mean, you never had that with a big, huge vendor. I love the open source culture. I love all of this, being able to talk to people, members like Ben and all of that and Jason willing to help. I mean, it's a completely different culture, definitely. And I don't have buyer's remorse. I just wish that we didn't have this latency at the busiest time of the year.
Sure. Yeah.
Can I jump in with one thought, though? George, the scenario that you described at your consortium is polar opposite to what I'm dealing with and what I suspect Eileen is dealing with. We have a central office. Our members are happily dependent upon us.
That's what I have now that I'm in Kansas.
And it's 99% of the time it works beautifully. They come to us. Our staff puts on, Renee knows I've said this, they get on their superhero leotards and capes and everything. They fly out to the libraries and they solve all their problems and they go, oh, you're so wonderful. And I think what's killing us right now is our leotards have holes in them. Our cape, we can't find them. The dry cleaners lost them. We're running around in our underwear trying to solve problems that we don't know how to solve. And it's just, our members aren't used to us not having all the answers. And we're not used to not having all the answers. And I don't know that us getting our members involved in the community is.
Yeah, you need your staff there at the library, at your office involved more. That's where the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the problem is our staff, and Renee knows this because she manages most of them, they're running around putting out fires. They're running around like, oops, I forgot an item type. Oops, I forgot a loan rule. Oops, I've made a mistake in the catalog. Can you undo this? And I can't even imagine. I don't know. I mean, I know one of our catalogers is attending. She attended the last catalogers interest group meeting. So that's great. Or was it Aspen? It might have been the Aspen group because we're having pains between Koha and Aspen too. No, thanks, Michelle. Michelle knows more than I do.
At this point, I should just say that.
At this point, I should say that I'm really nervous now because we haven't upgraded to we're still on 2205 here for another month or so. So
I hate to say,
I
hate to say it, George, but I would love if someone else was in the same boat as us, but not you particularly. But everybody else seems to be doing just fine on 2211, except CLAMS. And the thing is, if it was our firewalls, now I'm kind of arguing against my own brainwave that I had in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. If the firewalls were the issue, we would have had this terrible latency before we upgraded because the firewalls were in place already. And we upped our internet speed. I mean, we are, libraries are asking us, well, what are you doing about it? We're out here stuck on a cert desk. What is the CLAMS office doing about this? So we upgraded our internet speed at all of the libraries. But yeah, I mean, those firewalls were in place before we migrated. So, and we didn't have this terrible slowness on the previous version. So
I would
it's something
ask then-
changed. Something changed in this version that just screwed us over.
I would ask then, just double check, when was the last time an update was pushed to the firewall? Maybe something happened in an update that might have,
Okay.
it might be a coincidence at the time that you've done an upgrade, a firewall update was pushed out. Don't know, it can't, I can't say that it isn't Koha, but for you to see this and not have, from what it sounds like, other libraries saying the same things, it does sound more like something locally happening. And if you can test it outside of that firewall and confirm it, I mean, it sounds like you're taking the right steps to isolate.
Yeah, we're
the
trying
issues lie.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have our staff out of the libraries taking movies, for heaven's sake, of check in and check out, usually when the patrons are not there, because I think that would freak out the patrons. But emptying the overnight bin, that's where some of them have narrowed it down to that. So in the middle of their crazy summer on Martha's Vineyard, I'm asking them, can you take a movie of that? Can you video that so we can send it to the vendor? So, I think they know we're doing our best, but I can't blame them for having thoughts of why on earth did we go to the slower system. But I think it'll work out in the end if we can just get past this rough patch.
Yeah, I'm hearing a couple things from Steve and Eileen, and some of them are these like things that are real structural issues that are just really difficult and it's painful to get through, and I've definitely been on that end. But Steve, I would say some of the things you're describing are things that are just learning how everything works and getting in all that, and that will come along. And those discussions with ByWater, coming to these meetings, that will only accelerate the learning curve, and you will feel more comfortable. You'll get back to being the person that knows the answer to the question. So I definitely get that. We had migrated from a forked version of Koha into community Koha. So a lot of the things were very similar, but it was different enough that we were scrambling for a good while there. And I remember that pretty well. But I think from my perspective, and I think Christopher kind of alluded to this a little bit, when you're talking about things seem to be crumbling down on our end, even though there are difficulties that pop up with various upgrades and things that happen, overall, we're seeing improvement over long term. So I think, you will get to that point where as things become more familiar, you will also start to see that, okay, well, this is getting better. We got this feature we wanted. It does improve at a much faster rate than other systems. Sometimes those improvements cause big issues, and then you have to kind of suffer through those things for a while, and that absolutely can happen. And and then it's running around trying everything, trying to isolate particular issues. Absolutely, definitely. I mean, I've been in a year and a half, I've been working on a project to try to figure out a way to change the way we do some of the holds, because we're using this branch transfer limits and it slows stuff up. It's hard to manage. It's doing some things we needed to do. And I've been working on that for a while, and I can't wait to get away from it. And I feel like I'm like 95% there, but that last 5% is just hard to push over the line and just get done.
Can I ask about that? And I might need Renee's help on this, because Renee's the real brains behind the operation. Holds is one of our top issues right now, because of a lack of load balancing. And so right now it's all random. So some of our small libraries might get like 100 or more like hold requests on their poll sheet in the morning, and they're ready to die. And I was talking to Jessie at ByWater, and she mentioned something about using dollars, like, setting dollar. Is that branch transfer limit thing you're talking
That's
about,
the
or is this
trust,
something?
the cost transport matrix.
Yeah, we were thinking, could we kind of subvert that to our will to kind of fudge up a way to kind of load balance based on, something like, general circulation, traffic patterns, or
Yeah,
collection size or something.
Steve,
absolutely.
how many libraries do you have in your system?
We have 72, 3 locations, something like that.
With the cost matrix, the thing that I've been hearing in the community is, we use the cost matrix. We only have about 28 libraries in our system, but the cost matrix, I feel like the cost matrix is good, but setting it up, especially the more libraries that you have, makes it a more onerous task. And if you have changes that happen often, like if you're adding libraries or losing libraries,
You've got to adjust the calculus of it.
Work behind that cost matrix. I will say, if you use the cost matrix like we have, it's not it's not random like we were initially. When we went to the cost matrix, it was a huge improvement for us. I also had a worksheet that I had worked out to improve how to utilize the cost matrix a little bit better, according to how often we have couriers and how many couriers are involved in the mix and things of that nature. But I will say it made a huge improvement. But the overall story that I hear in the community is the more libraries that you have, it makes maintaining that cost matrix more challenging.
It's
Am I
painful, but
right?
it's worth it for us, I would say. for
But
us,
could I just say, so we're not talking about any money. We don't charge for delivery. We don't pay for it. The state
Right.
pays for it.
No,
We
it's
would
just a weird
just use
title.
it to basically say, you get 5% of the holds, you get 7% of the holds, you get 2.5% of the holds, something like that.
Yeah.
That's possible.
The
It kind
nature
of
of the
doesn't
cost
work.
matrix doesn't have to do with cost. The cost really is the distance traveled initially is the concept of it. But I think of the cost as, what is it costing in distance, and or how soon you can get it to somebody, and how what are the other elements involved to judge that. I think it was initially created as a distance, to find the shortest distance between the library requesting it and the library that has it.
But still, we're talking about an Excel formula. If we wanted to proportionally redistribute holds, we're just talking about a little bit of calculus in Excel to basically crunch the numbers for us.
That's what we did.
Okay, yeah, because that would not, that for us, we're a static consortium. We're not actively recruiting, and our public libraries are kind of trapped with us, so they really can't go anywhere. So, we don't have to worry about adding or losing members and having to recrunch the numbers all the time. So it sounds like that's the right path for us.
Well, I had a couple of questions. Christopher, you said it improved things for you. What kind of improvements did you see, and what were you experiencing that you wanted improved?
Well, initially, right out of the gate, our top library branch was getting flooded with all the requests.
Okay.
We didn't do the randomization. I knew that the randomization in the hold requests was going to be hit and miss, and didn't seem like it's not so much trying to put the requests to a library that has a particular item equitably, as more I wanted to make sure that our patrons were getting stuff as soon as they could. And so we wanted to make sure, okay, this library is open 3 days a week. You know, there's 2 couriers in the mix to that particular library. How does that weigh compared to this library that's open 7 days a week? And, you know, they might be a little bit further out, but they can respond to that a little bit quicker. We were kind of massaging the cost matrix towards that rather than just by distance alone. You know, we found that, you know, the cost matrix by itself, if you just do distance, I saw a huge improvement. It was more equitable in getting requests to the libraries that made more sense where they should be coming from. You know, they could respond quicker to specific requests than, you know, these random outlying libraries that are out in rural areas that, you know, it would take a week or more to get that item to them. So, you know, just alone with that cost matrix, huge difference. But like I said, I did some calculations, factored in some other things to tweak those numbers to say it makes more sense to come, you know, to request this library before, you know, another library that's just closer.
So I posted a link to a video that PTFS has on the transportation cost matrix. I posted it in the chat box. I'm sure that Jason did a presentation at one of the conferences about the transportation cost matrix, and there's a video for that, but I can't find it.
I did one
think
too.
Christopher did.
That was at
Christopher
the
did
Erie
it, okay.
conference.
Then if it was at the Erie conference, there wouldn't be a video of it.
There's no record of it, but it happened.
But if you reach out to me, you know, you can reach out to me via email. I can share what I have. It's been years, and this is the thing. I haven't had to touch it except for when we've added a library, and you know, it's been a few years since we've added a library, but I don't have to touch it all that often. And
Okay, because that was my next question. If the libraries are fairly static, is it just to set it and forget it? And it
Yeah.
sounds like it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the other thing, I set up the transportation cost matrix when I was at the ValNet Consortium in Idaho. We don't use it here in Kansas, but the idea that that you're assigning a cost is kind of deceptive. What it is you're giving if you've got 72 libraries, you're going to have 72 columns and 72 rows. And one row will say library A and one column will say library B. And you're going to put a number in there. And that number is just a value that represents the cost that it takes to get an item from library A to library B. And if library A to library B is like 5 and library A to library C is 10, then it's going to go with the lowest number, with the lowest value. That's where the item is going to come from. But there are a couple of things you have to remember. So it only works if you have things where there are multiple items. If there's only one item, you're not going to, there's no comparison to make. And it only works if there's more than one item available. So you might have 100 copies of the new John Grisham book in your system, but if only one of them's available, then that's the one that's going to fill the request. It doesn't matter what the value is. Okay. So there's another setting in Koha that I don't know if you have set or not, called local hold priority. Do you have that turned on? Do you know?
We do.
And there's in the past, when I was at the ValNet Consortium, there was a discussion of doing local hold priority groups. And that's kind of what Bob has done using his library transfer limits to say that the library, because they're statewide in Colorado, which is a pretty big state, you know, the libraries in this corner of the state don't transfer things to the library. The libraries in the northwest corner don't transfer things to the libraries in the southeast corner of the state, because that's, you know, like a 500-mile trip. And so those, you have that worked out some way differently, don't you, Bob?
Yeah, and sometimes those libraries do transport to the other, but what we're doing is we're using that to manage when libraries are closed, but or are turning off resource sharing, like our schools. That's one, but they still want holds to be placed within, so we can manage that way. And then if a district wants to lend amongst themselves something that doesn't go outside the district, that's another thing we do. But I've been talking with the CLAMS people about developments where we could make local holds priority also look at holds groups. That would be really nice, because then you could have kind of a tiered system. Is it at the home library? Then we keep it here. Then look and see, are you part of a local hold group? And then if not, then it would go out to everyone else.
Yeah, that's similar to when I worked at the ValNet Library Consortium, and this shows you one of the disadvantages of having a completely decentralized organization like the ValNet Consortium is that consortium is made up, the Latah County Library had 7 branches. Their school districts had multiple branches. The Prairie River Library District had 9 branches. And so the idea was to have a system where the items would be shared locally first at the home library, and then within the district, and then within the whole consortium, so that the priority would be given to the home library, then the group, and then free for all. And so ValNet wanted to do that development, but the ValNet directors as a committee could never decide how that was going to be funded. And when I moved to Kansas after being on Koha for 4 years in Idaho and then moved to Kansas, I said, if you guys are still interested in doing that, we could use that here also. And then they could never get that together. And I promised them up to 20% of the cost of that development. And it never happened because they've probably forgotten about it now. It's been so long. If somebody wants to work on that kind of a development, that's certainly something that I would be interested in. So if you, Bob,
great.
and Eileen are talking about that,
Yeah.
I have less of a need for it here because I only have 2 districts in my 50 libraries, but that kind of thing would help your situation too, Steve, is if you had, say the libraries in this county get priority for the things that are in this county. And once all those requests are filled, then they go outside of the county. Or I don't know how your libraries are organized, how many multi-branch libraries might be a part of your system. So
we really need it. So I have just before Steve answers that, if I may, the bug that Jason put in here, I was asking Bob about this just before the meeting when he was trying to get organized. I apologize. This bug 20747, I've made a comment on that. I'm not exactly sure if that's what we want. We don't want the whole to go to a group first. We want the whole to go to Falmouth, Maine. Then if Falmouth, Maine doesn't have it, and if the person wants to pick it up there, we want it to search East Falmouth and North Falmouth. And that, that's the middle group. And then go to the bigger ring, which is, and the same for Martha's Vineyard. We have 6 libraries there, but I hate mentioning the island because I don't want people to think we're unique and nobody else contributes to this. But we wanted to search the main, the main choice library first, then the branches or the locale or whatever, if they have delivery within that location, and then the bigger group. But I'm not sure the way this bug is worded. To me, it sounds like bypass the main, the first choice library and automatically go to a group instead of paging a hold at. But I'm not that used to bugs. So
do you want all of your libraries to do that, or certain groups of libraries to do that?
Certain groups.
Okay.
But
I was gonna say in general, there is a preference in there, and you can say which. I think you can place the order of which libraries get hit first.
Oh, you can?
I think there's a preference. Isn't that setting in the randomization? I think the order that you place them in there can dictate what gets hit first.
But I think it also always prioritizes home library to home branch for a whole. Like The home
Yeah,
branch
that's
can,
fine, but that's fine. But say Edgartown can't fill a hold. We
Mhm.
wanted to page Vineyard Haven, West Tisbury, all those other great vineyard libraries before going to the mainland. And the
yeah, so
issue
that would
is,
be the hierarchical group, right?
yeah, but this bug sounds as if it should go to the group before the home library, before the pickup library. I wanted to go to the library first, then the smaller
That's the
group.
way I read this bug, is it starts with the home library
Oh, really?
and then the group. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the way I read it, because I'm partly, you know, this is exactly the bug. Lizette was the person that replaced me in Idaho, and that's exactly what I described to the ValNet directors, and she just wrote it down and put it in a bug.
The way it's worded is kind of confusing, though. So in my comment, I've tried to say what we want, but I don't know whether to vote for this bug before. So you think it does prioritize the library, then the group, then the larger group? We thought the transport matrix would resolve this issue, but it didn't. So we have Aquina, a tiny library only open 2 days a week or whatever, saying that they're getting stuff in from Hyannis when they should be getting it in if they don't have it from Vineyard Haven or Edgartown. But I didn't realize in that randomization that we could set it that way, but it ties into if something is checked in Hyannis and there's a hold for it, no matter where it is, it'll travel over to the vineyard if they check it in first. I find it hard to articulate this whole issue.
The preference I was thinking of, and it doesn't do it by group, it just does it in the system overall, was the StaticHoldsQueueWeight. We have ours set to 0. We're not utilizing this particular preference because we are using the transport cost matrix, but you can set this setting. You can list your branch codes separated by commas, and by default it's set to in random order, but you can have it set in the order that you list it in that field. So there is that capability, but again, it doesn't, do that per group of libraries. It's everybody.
Yep, I think we just need some development to get what we want. And as far as that particular bug, we can reference that bug, but if it's, we could definitely work on getting the development more along the lines of what we need.
Yeah,
we can get that dialed in. So I wouldn't worry too much about the specific bug and how that's worded, because that can get changed, or if we need to file a new bug, we could do that. There's lots of options. So it's just good to see that there's some other talk about this over the years. So we should be able to get that figured out one way or another.
And if anybody wants to co-fund, that'll be great.
Absolutely.
But that's related to another bug. I think we reported. We want the hold to wait at the library where it's available for 72 hours before moving on, to give the little libraries that are only open a couple of days a week a chance to fill the hold for the patron. So that's another related to transport. And I hope I have a bug in about that. We want a pause on the hold for, I think we used to have it in our last system, 72 hours or something, where it would give the little guy the chance to fill their hold without getting it from another location.
I had put in a
Is that-
request a while ago, I would like to see there to be, some sort of, wait and move on.
Yes, yes.
Because if some
Yeah.
library isn't responding, it just sits there forever. And it would be nice that, oh, there hasn't been any movement on this. Let's move on, because it's showing available. Nobody's responding. We have libraries that are only open a few days a week. It would be nice to say, well, if you're not responding to this particular a particular hold in say a week, then okay, go to another library, because and make rounds basically through the queue if people aren't responding to things. It would be nice if there was that mechanism,
but not to move too fast either.
Right.
Like we have one of our little Dennis libraries. There's 5 libraries in the town of Dennis. Don't start me off. But they're complaining, I have the book on my shelf and it's for my patron and it's been filled by a library that opens earlier. Could it not just wait and fill that hole that I have the material and yet it's traveling from another library to fill my patron's hold? So
that would be a local holds priority thing. I would set.
And
One of the
The
things we notice
transferring
is
after-
if somebody, you know, pulls a hold and checks it in on their thing, even if it wasn't in their holds queue, it might fill the hold for another library and get sent. And so since we're the biggest library in our consortium, we've been asked by all the other libraries to not look for books for their libraries and more than once a week. And I guess that's 2 separate things, but it definitely feels like we have the transport cost matrix in effect, but we still sometimes have things show up that we have and they're coming up on our holds queue, but they have them too for some reason. I don't know. It's just, it does definitely feel like there's some issues that we could be doing some more development in.
About a year and a half ago, a bunch of us got together and just talked about holds and potential development. So we didn't really decide on anything, but there, with more consortia coming on, seems like that's going to be more of a ripe discussion where we can kind of band together, get ideas. Because I know with ByWater, if we all come and say like, here's a large group of us, these are the things that we want to change, they're gonna pay a lot more attention to that than when I've been like, we have really weird hold ways that we do things. We'd like you to work on code that's just for us. And then they're like, yeah, maybe, probably not.
OSL would definitely like to be in on that conversation.
yeah. Yeah,
So-
I mean, that's a great idea, a holds meeting. And then, I mean, that's how we got things changed with Overdrive for holds.
So
that'd be great. Thank you.
Bob mentioned the conference. He put a link to the conference page on the koha-US website in the chat box. How many of us are going to that conference? Why don't we all have a discussion there?
Yeah.
I mean, we've done
Yeah,
that
that's what I was
before. We all
thinking.
had lunch
good.
one time in Coeur d'Alene, all the consortia people. We should come up with a time that we can all sit down together.
Yeah.
And just do this, what we're doing right now, just in person.
I would go for one day if I knew what day that holds discussion was going to be. I know, seriously, I just can't
Yeah.
go for the
I understand.
I mean, 2 of our people are going, Avery and Brannon, who's not here. And I'm trying to convince Michelle to go. But I mean, I hope to attend virtually. Do you have to register? This is probably a stupid question. Do you have to register if you plan to attend virtually?
It would be nice. We're trying to keep track of interest, so we do have our online people registering. It doesn't cost you anything to register.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So I wasn't sure of the process there.
it
So
just makes sure that because you're attending virtually, it makes sure that we send you the links to things.
okay, so I do that, register, but say I want to go virtually. But if there was like a really important discussion, and I know it's all important, but if there was something going on about the holes, Massachusetts is not that far from New Hampshire, so I could go up for the day.
What I'm going to propose is that I've added a couple people to the email distribution group for Consortia. If you would like to get on that, I will start that discussion for trying to get a day, and we'll use that email distribution group. So if you want to be on that and you're not currently, or you're not sure if you're on that list, I will make sure you're on there or get added. So just email me at the vice president at koha-US.org, and I will make sure that I get that started. And we could pick a day, we can pick a time, and we'll just sit down and work it out.
It wouldn't be a bad idea. I mean, if people are interested and can't attend, but can go online. I mean, instead of doing something like this during lunch, I mean, Bob, you could devote the Consortia SIG time
Sure.
to this topic, you know, kind of a mini holds summit for Consortia, and brainstorm on, you know, what libraries are looking for.
I'll put out a couple options, and then we'll kind of we'll get some feedback and decide from there.
I'm just looking at the schedule right now, and the Consortia discussion time is 3 to 4 on Friday.
I think you might be looking at an old.
I'm looking at the one on the website. If that's not up to date, then I guess it does say subject to change.
The Consortia SIG meeting like this, which will be the next time we do this, will be the very coveted last session of the conference on Saturday.
Oh, on Saturday. Okay.
So there might be other Consortia related content on Friday. We have a few Consortia presentations, so.
Okay.
Oh, Saturday, that would be easy for me to go up. Okay. Is
So,
there
yeah.
an option? Is there an option for the conference to like pay for one day rather than going to the entire thing?
Our price is pretty
Because
low.
it's such a
Okay.
low cost, we don't parse out pricing
Okay.
per day. So
It's more like the staying at the hotel, the meals, you know,
Sure.
and then coverage. Even though we work remotely, we still have to, somebody has to stay on Cape to support the libraries. So that's more the cost I was thinking of. Is it possible to download this chat? There's a lot of links. Can I just save chat?
Yeah, that
if I'm
should be
save
it.
chat.
Okay, thank you.
There's like the 3 dots. and
Yeah, I
there's the
see it.
save chat option.
I've done. It's gone, but it's there.
It buries it somewhere. It took me an hour to find it one day on my computer. It just sticks it someplace where it wants to stick it in a folder called Zoom somewhere. But you'll find it eventually.
Well, we are a bit after, and I know I need to get going. But this was a really great, robust discussion. If this continues up, I will definitely consider. We've been doing these every other month, but we can definitely look at doing them more monthly. So if you feel like that would be useful, feel free to send me that feedback. And the reason why we went down to half is a few years ago, there was less Consortia, so less people were showing up to these meetings, and it was a lot of Jason and I just, catching up. But recently, the discussions have been varied and with lots of representation. So if we need more, we could definitely do more. I'm willing to do that. All right. Well, everybody have a great rest of your day. I'll stop the recording. And